All right, so you've shared this 2024 GOP platform with us, and, well, it's quite something. It's not just like a dry, list of bullet points. This is like a whole statement.
It really is, yeah.
And the language, right from the get-go, it's striking. It's like they're setting the stage for, I don't know, some kind of political thriller.
Yeah, you're right. The preamble, it's more like a call to action. It doesn't read like a policy document at all.
It's like, nation in serious decline and facing threats that could destroy our country. They're definitely going for a sense of urgency there.
Absolutely. This narrative, this idea of America at a crossroads, it's crucial for them, I think. It sets the stage for everything that follows.
Because the solutions are coming, and fast. They practically shout it from the rooftops. 20 promises that we will accomplish very quickly. Speed in action, that seems to be the name of the game.
It's about projecting strength, for sure, efficiency, and probably contrasting themselves with, well, what they'll likely paint as a slow-moving opposition.
Okay, so let's get into some of these promises. A few really jumped out at me. Largest deportation operation in American history, for one. That's a bold statement to make.
It is, and to even think about what that would actually entail. I mean, the logistics alone are mind-boggling. We're potentially talking about millions of people.
Right, and then the legal questions.
Exactly. How do you even begin to target individuals for something like that? What are the criteria?
Yeah.
And the legal challenges that would inevitably follow. It's a massive undertaking.
And then there's this great Iron Dome missile defense shield over our entire country. I mean, is that even technologically feasible?
Well, the Iron Dome as it exists now, it's designed for a much smaller area, right? Defending against shorter range rockets. To scale that up, to cover the entire U.S. with all its different terrain,
Yeah.
that would be a technological challenge unlike anything we've seen, put it mildly.
And then there's the cost.
Astronomical doesn't even begin to describe it.
And they're very specific that it should be all made in America, which seems to be another recurring theme here, this big emphasis on American manufacturing.
Absolutely. It plays into a couple of things. One is reducing reliance on foreign countries, especially China, who they call out directly later on.
Right, right.
But it also taps into anxieties about globalization and job losses, those who feel left behind by the way the economy's changed. It's a powerful message.
Definitely. And here's another one that caught my eye. Keep men out of women's sports.
Yeah.
That feels very much of this moment, culturally speaking.
Oh, absolutely. This is tapping into some really heated debates. You have a segment of their base that's very concerned about fairness in women's sports and about traditional gender roles.
Right.
But then, of course, it also sparks a whole other debate about transgender rights and inclusion. It's just pouring fuel on the fire of the culture wars, really.
It's a hot button issue, that's for sure. So we've got the dramatic intro, we've got the promise of swift action, these really attention-grabbing promises. But let's dig a little deeper now. Let's actually get into some of the chapters of this platform. What's the tone like as we go further in?
Oh, buckle up, because the language only gets more intense when we start looking at the specific policies.
Oh, is that so?
Take Chapter 2, for example. Seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. Invasion. Now, that's a loaded word, don't you think?
Definitely loaded. It's about painting a picture of imminent danger. Immigration isn't just a complex issue, it's a threat.
Right, a threat to national security. It's setting the stage for a very particular set of policies.
And they're not shying away from strong tactics either. We're talking about a full fentanyl blockade, even invoking the Alien Enemies Act.
And this is where understanding the historical context and the potential implications of these things is so important. Fentanyl blockade has a certain ring to it, sounds assertive, but what does it actually mean? How would you even do that?
Yeah, how would that even work?
What impact would it have on legitimate trade, on people traveling? And then the Alien Enemies Act. I mean, that's a law with a really complicated and controversial past, dating back to the Quasi-War with France. It was used during World War II. To invoke that now, it raises serious concerns about civil liberties.
Absolutely. So we're moving from border security to the economy, Chapter 3, which focuses on building the greatest economy in history.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some things in there that surprised me. They talk about crypto and artificial intelligence. It's not really what I typically associate with the GOP.
It's interesting, isn't it? It suggests maybe a bit of a shift in their thinking on economic issues. Cryptocurrency has this association with deregulation, with challenging the traditional financial systems. That might tap into some libertarian ideals that have been gaining traction within the party.
So maybe they're trying to appeal to a younger, more tech-savvy crowd who are really into crypto as the future of finance.
Exactly. And then with AI, well, They don't want to seem behind the times. It's about positioning themselves as forward-thinking, acknowledging that AI is going to be a big part of the economy, of global strategy moving forward.
Right.
And of course, they also talk about pushing back against what they call radical left-wing ideas when it comes to AI development, so it becomes an ideological battleground as well.
Okay, let's move on to a chapter that I have a feeling might be the most talked about, and that's Chapter 9, Government of, by, and for the People. Specifically, I want to talk about this section on left-wing gender insanity. I mean, wow. Is that strategic? Is it just inflammatory? What's going on there?
Oh, that phrase is a powder keg. There's no doubt about it. It is meant to provoke a reaction. It's about targeting those social and cultural issues that have become so polarized.
Right.
They want to rally their base, tap into anxieties surrounding gender identity and what they see as an attack on traditional values. But by doing that, they're also deepening the partisan divide.
It's like they're saying you're either with us or against us.
In a way, yes, it's risky, but it could also be very effective. They control the narrative, energize their base. But it might also alienate moderate voters and make it even harder to find common ground.
It's a gamble for sure. We've covered a lot of ground from sealing the border to AI to, as you said, left-wing gender insanity. But what about what's not being said here? Any glaring omissions you noticed?
Oh, that's a really important point. They're tackling a lot of hot-button issues, but some things are very conspicuously absent. Climate change, for instance. It's barely a blip on their radar.
Which is interesting because you would think that climate change would tie into their concerns about things like energy independence and even economic competitiveness.
You absolutely would. And their silence on this is telling. It could be strategic. Maybe they feel like focusing on other things will resonate more strongly with their base, or maybe they're trying to avoid alienating more moderate voters who list climate change as a top concern.
It makes you wonder how all of this, what they're saying, what they're not saying, will actually land with voters and how it's all going to play out in 2024. This is just the beginning, I have a feeling.
Oh, absolutely. We have a long way to go before the 2024 election, and we know things can change quickly in politics. But this platform gives us a glimpse into their strategy, how it resonates with voters, how the media covers it, how the other side responds. It's all going to shape the race in the months to come.
This is just the opening move in what's probably going to be a very long and complicated game. We'll continue to unpack all of this in our next episode. But for now, what's your biggest takeaway from all of this? What should we really be paying attention to going forward?
Pay attention to the language, pay attention to the narratives, because this platform, it's about storytelling as much as it is about policy. They're creating a sense of urgency, framing the challenges in a very particular way, and they're presenting their solutions in a way that aligns with their worldview.
It's about tapping into people's anxieties, but also their aspirations, right?
Exactly, their hopes and their fears. And as we navigate this election cycle, it's so important to be aware of these tactics, to think critically about the information that's being presented.
Not to just take everything at face value.
Exactly. Question the assumptions. And don't be afraid to engage in thoughtful dialogue, even with those who see things differently than you do.
Because that's what democracy thrives on,
Yeah.
right? Informed citizens who are willing to have those tough conversations.
It is. This deep dive into the 2024 GOP platform, it's just the start. Now it's up to all of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and help shape the future. And the stories continue, really, as we move into some of these other key areas, like Chapter 10, Returning to Peace Through Strength, they call it. It's about foreign policy, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very assertive stance, wouldn't you say? Like almost a throwback to that Cold War mentality, but with new players, new battlefields, of course.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because while they do talk about a strong military commitment to allies, traditional Republican talking points, there's also this big emphasis on modernizing the military, on investing in all this cutting-edge research. They know warfare is changing.
Yeah, they're specifically calling out things like cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, even hypersonic weapons. It's like they're building a military for the future, for a whole new era of, I don't know, geopolitical competition.
Exactly. They see vulnerabilities, right. And they want America to be ahead of the curve, technologically speaking, ahead of rivals like China and Russia. Because the conflicts of the future, they might not just be fought on land or sea. We're talking cyberspace. The race for technological dominance, it's a whole new ballgame.
And speaking of China, they don't mince words about where they stand, do they? Revoking China's most favored nation status, phasing out imports of essential goods, even barring them from buying American real estate. That's a strong message.
It's a huge shift from how previous administrations, both Democrat and Republican, have dealt with China. This is about confrontation. They see China's economic rise, their global ambitions, as a direct threat to American interests.
It's interesting, though, because while they're advocating for this tough stance on China, they also talk a lot about strengthening alliances. It's like they're trying to, I don't know, build this united front, and not just through military might, but through partnerships.
It's a multi-pronged strategy for sure. They're acknowledging that in today's world, you need more than just a big stick. Economic leverage matters. Having a network of strong alliances matters.
Right.
They want America to be seen as a leader, rallying other countries to their side.
A leader, but also a protector. It's this very classic idea of America as a global leader,
Yeah.
this beacon of democracy and freedom. We see that throughout this document.
All the time. It's a powerful narrative, and it taps into this very deep well of American exceptionalism. Especially in times of uncertainty, people want to believe in a strong America, an America that's out there on the world stage defending its interests.
Absolutely. So we talked about what they're saying, but what about, again, those silences? What's getting less attention here than you might expect, given everything that's going on?
Well, climate change is the big one. We talked about it a bit earlier. They barely touch on it. And yet, for a lot of voters, especially younger generations, it's a huge concern.
It's true. And you could argue that it ties into their concerns about energy and the economy, like we were saying.
Absolutely. So why the silence? It might just be strategic. Maybe those aren't the issues they want to focus on. They think other things will resonate more with their base. Or maybe they're trying to avoid alienating more moderate voters who do care about climate change.
Healthcare is another one that comes to mind. They mention it, sure, protecting Medicare, lowering costs, all that. But there are no concrete proposals, nothing specific in the platform.
No, you're right. And healthcare is always a big one for voters. It consistently ranks as a top issue. So, again, why so light on the details? It could be intentional. Maybe they're leaving themselves some wiggle room to adjust their message during the campaign, depending on what they're hearing from voters.
So it's about trying to appeal to their base, but also maybe trying to broaden their appeal to more moderate voters who might not be on board with some of the more extreme positions.
Exactly. And that is a tough needle to thread. It'll be very interesting to see how they try to pull it off.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And like you said, a gamble. We're really just at the beginning of what's probably going to be a very, very long election cycle. This platform, it's just the opening statement.
Exactly. It's all about messaging and persuasion at this point. How they frame these issues, the language they use, what they choose to prioritize. It's all carefully calculated.
Right. It's about telling a story. It just keeps coming back to me, this idea that it's as much about what they're not saying as what they are. We talked about climate change, healthcare, but are there any other, I don't know, silences that you noticed? Things that stood out?
Well, they don't have a lot to say about education, do they?
Not really. No.
I mean, they touch on parental rights, school choice, those sorts of things.
Right.
But broader issues like teacher shortages, funding for schools, the cost of college, practically non-existent.
It's like they're zeroing in on these very specific concerns, the ones that really matter to their base, and maybe not thinking so much about the bigger picture.
It's very targeted, for sure. And that seems to be a pattern, right? Highlighting the hot button issues, the ones that will really get their base fired up, even if it means, sidelining some of the other issues that might appeal to a wider range of voters.
So is this about winning an election, or is it more about, I don't know, shoring up their base, making sure those voters are energized that they turn out?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because they need both, right? They need to energize their base, absolutely. But they can't alienate everyone else in the process.
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is, and it's a risky one, because if you go too far in one direction...
Right, you risk alienating the people in the middle.
Exactly. And those are the voters who often decide elections. Only time will tell if they've got the balance right. But we'll be watching closely, that's for sure.
We will. This has been great, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. This platform, it's a starting point. There's going to be so much more to unpack as the campaign heats up. What should we be paying attention to? Any final takeaways for our listeners?
I always go back to the narratives, pay attention to how they're framing things, because like we've been saying, this is about more than just policy. It's about telling a story, creating a sense of urgency, presenting a problem and then presenting their solution to that problem.
And tapping into people's emotions in the process.
Exactly. And those emotions are powerful, right? So it's about being aware of that. As we go through this election, as we listen to the candidates, as we see the ads, Just remember to be critical.
Don't just take everything at face value.
Exactly. Do your research, ask questions, and don't be afraid to talk to people who see things differently than you do, because ultimately, that's how we make sense of all this.
That's how we move forward.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. The 2024 GOP platform, it's a roadmap of sorts, laying out their vision for the country. Whether you agree with it or not, it's worth taking the time to understand it.
Couldn't agree more.
Because the choices we make in the next year, they're going to shape the future for all of us.
They will. It's up to all of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and make our voices heard.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep those conversations going.